we're now getting down to the end of the list. We have 2 series left, and the second last one is Nodame Cantabile Finale. So this is made by JC Staff, and it's a comedy romance. So this is actually the 3rd season of the Nodame Cantabile series franchise. And what it is about is it follows the story of a young man named Chiaki who longs to be a composer. And in the first season, he encounters a young girl named Nodame, who is sort of an aspiring pianist who has very quirky aspects to her. So, and as the series goes on, they kind of get into a relationship. And now we're in the 3rd season where they're in Paris and stuff's happening. So it's kind of hard to talk about it. We're going to just give some quick little pointers about what we think about the 3rd season, as we haven't actually talked about the 1st or 2nd season yet. So what do you think is going on, Sora?
Yeah, so we definitely plan to review all 3 of them as a whole once we've finished finale. But for talking about the finale season, it's interesting in a lot of ways because the 1st season really brings you into the series and gets you interested, and it has phenomenal music throughout. Like, that's its whole idea with Nodame, is that the music is very interesting and shows a story while the story is going on. And now in finale, they're really focusing on concluding the story and showing what the characters are sort of finishing up in their lives, what their final goals are and their final aspirations, and it's all sort of tying together. In Paris chapter, they had sort of moved to Paris, and now they're like sort of finalizing their goals. They're like, this is what I really want to do with my life. And they always had a bit of like changing of ideas of what they wanted to do. Now finale, they're really starting to solidify where all the characters are going with their lives. Maybe not as fast as the pace we'd like, though. And that's the thing. That's the thing I'm finding with it, is that with finale, it just feels like it's extending Paris chapter right now, and I'd really like to see it start concluding and actually getting to the final moments of the 2 main characters' relationship, because we still don't know what's going on there, as well as the sort of musical careers final aspects of them both.
For me, at this point in time, I'm slightly disappointed with finale. I'm not as disappointed as I was when I first started Paris chapter, but still, this is nowhere near as strong or as good as the 1st season was. The 1st season was very, very strong. I love that series just for the 1st season, but it seems as if they're extending it. They're making it go on much more longer than it actually should. So I actually just want to get to the ending. I want to know what happens to Chiaki and Nodame. I just want it to be done, over with. Like, just finish it up. I don't want to sit through another 13 episodes to see all this happen. I want the ending. And this is the last season, so I am going to get the ending, but I'm kind of sad that I have to sit through all the other kind of crap just to get the ending that I wanted at the end of possibly the very 1st season. So, yeah, that's my sort of take.
If you are interested in getting into the Nodame sort of series as a whole, what you're really looking at is a series that's all about the romance, comedy, and music. So if you like any of those things, it actually does all 3 of those things quite exceptionally. So, I mean, it's really good if you're interested in seeing a musical series, because there's not many of them out there. And this is probably one of the top-notch ones. It actually has really solid comedy. And me and Leon here do have a little bit of disagreement. He considers it more of a comedy series. I consider it more of a romance series.
Yeah.
And for the romance parts for me, that's what really hooked me into the series. And I felt that they really make sure that there is a strong romance going on throughout the series, where as a lot of romance shows, what I find is that they make it more of an awkward friend situation. But with Nodame, while they do have an awkward friend situation, it's definitely prominent, I felt that there was actual, true, mature romance going on there as well. And so I'm really glad that they did that, because I feel like the actual true romance shows are very rare. It's mostly high school flirting is the usual, we're kind of friends type feel. Whereas this one, there really is a true, funny, and interesting romance going on throughout. And so in finale, I do feel like it's losing a bit of its edge by this point. You've watched so many episodes of it at this point that you do understand their dynamic almost perfectly, and they haven't changed the formula much in each episode. So, since you understand it so well, it is feeling like it's getting a bit repetitive at this point, but it's probably worth watching it all the way to the end. So, I mean, if you have seen all the way up to Paris chapter, I don't see much of a reason to give up and not watch finale.
Yeah, I would say it's a verdict too. I mean, obviously you haven't seen the first 2, you wouldn't watch this show. But if you have seen the Paris chapter and you're deciding whether you want to, spend your time in the last one, I'd say do it. You might as well go for it. I mean, we want to get to the end of the series and see how it all turns out in the end. But I still think that there's a lot of improvement they can do for this 3rd season to try to bring it back up to the sort of star quality the 1st season had.
Alright, so we're now at our last series that we're previewing, and that is Katanagatari. And it's made by the studio White Fox, and it's an action romantic comedy. Now, we've only seen 2 episodes of this series, but it's 60-minute long episodes, so I feel like we do have a really good grasp of what the series is about. And so it follows a sword style in ancient Japan that's different than any other sword style in that it doesn't use a sword. It is a sword style where you use your hands and legs in a martial artist style. However, you use it to fight other people with swords. And so there's only one known person that uses this style, and he's the 7th head of the family that is famous for it. And a strategician, as she calls herself, has come to his exiled island to find out if he can help her find 12 of the most amazing swords ever made and created. And each of these swords has special abilities, whether it be they can decapitate anyone at will, or they can have the hardest durability and never break. So each one of these swords has the different abilities, and so she explains that she wants him to help get all these swords together because he doesn't want to do it for money, and he doesn't want to do it for the sake of pride in swordsmanship. And so he's the only person who wouldn't want to do it for one of those two things, because beforehand she's tried hiring ninjas who wanted money and swordsmen who wanted the swords for themselves. And so this is the final sort of person that can find those 12 swords and sort of collect them to save the world type idea.
For me, I'll have to start off by saying that I was actually kind of impressed with this series, and the first thing that sort of drew me in was its animation style. It is very different from something that you would see in your very typical high school, slice of life anime. It has this sort of like visual impact, and it seems kind of like a mix of Eastern, Western sort of visual art style, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I was interested in the art style as well, but what really grasped me in the show once I started getting into it was the dialogue, actually, because while it has cool action parts that are fine, they aren't the best ever, but I mean, they're fine. What I really enjoyed about it was that the dialogue is so interesting, and I know a lot of people claim that Bakemonogatari's dialogue is very good, and the thing is, it's similar to Bakemonogatari's dialogue style, where everyone's so fast and going back and forth and saying all sorts of interesting ideas, but this time it really worked for me, whereas Bakemonogatari's did not. But this one actually really intrigued me in a lot of ways because the characters, they had subtle ideas behind everything they were saying and all the different not necessarily metaphors, but the way they spoke about things made you really interested. And sometimes they're funny, sometimes they said something you didn't expect, and I really enjoyed it. Although the downside of this is that they use this talking almost constantly throughout the series. And when you're watching an hour-long talking session, it can get a bit tedious.
Yeah, I have to agree. That's probably the only one thing that I didn't like too much, is that these are, I do like the fact that they are 40, 45, 47-minute episodes, so there is a lot of content per episode, but at the same time, there is a lot of talking, and a lot of it just seems sort of random. And I mean, in the second episode, they're walking through the desert, and they stop, and they literally talk for about 15 minutes for trying to come up for a catchphrase, because she wants to write this book about his sort of adventure, or the adventure that they're going on. And she said, you need a catchphrase, you're too boring. So I have a list of catchphrases, let's think of a catchphrase. And they go on for literally almost 10-15 minutes, sitting down in a desert, trying to think of a catchphrase. And while it is very interesting, I did like it for that interesting aspect, it still kind of got dumbed down, because the whole point of the story is they have to go find these sort of 12 swordsmen who have these 12 swords, beat them up, sort of more or less, and take the sword back for the save the world type aspect. And still, overall, I am intrigued with this series, and I think I'm going to keep going with it.
Yeah, I'm liking this 12 swords aspect, and throughout the first 2 episodes, they do fight people with the first 2 swords, and so, they are focused on what they're trying to do. So if this goes 12 episodes, you get 12 swords. It makes a lot of sense. So I'm hoping that they really do focus on that aspect and actually make it interesting and continue along with it. Yeah,
the downfall with this, though, I found, though, is that it is kind of a very generic storyline, so I do want them to sort of bring it up, make it go above and beyond. Don't make 12 swords and 12 battles, and that's the end of the series. If that's just what it is, it's going to not have a whole lot of pop. I'm expecting that hopefully they're going to give me something else. That's what I want to see.
For myself, I definitely recommend continuing with this series or picking it up. It's really different than your average series. At the same time, it does have a story that's a little bit generic, but the dialogue, the feel of it, the atmosphere, it's all worth it. I think there's an interesting feel to it that a lot of people could get into.
Mm-hmm. Same here. I'd say pick it up. It is kind of generic in its own right, but I think the cool animation style and just the sort of promise I'm looking for in this series for the future could be something really, really good in the end.